figurative thing here. So this is what we're doing. We're basically, what I have here is an object that is just a simple cone, and I've attached a sphere to it, and I've added some joints so that you can move this thing around. The thing that I'm actually moving is this star, which is called a goal, and the joints move around it. Anytime I move that goal around, the object is going to move accordingly to it. So it's a really easy way that you could keyframe an object. You know, let's say here, and let's just move this up here, and then we'll move it down here. Oops, sorry. We'll move it down here. And then, you know, this is a really easy way to create a complex movement and motion, any sort of object. You know, it doesn't have to be a figurative type of thing. You know, it could be a lot of different things that you add these sort of things to. So what you need is a basic model. So I started out with just a cone. And one thing to note about objects that you're using is they need to have an adequate amount of polygons to have smooth sort of bends in them. The same way that the deformer objects, when we use the deformer objects, we want to have a lot of polygons so that when we bulge something or we bend something, it isn't a really geometrical sort of bend. It's more of a smooth, fluid sort of bend. So what I want to do to this cone to begin with is just make sure that I have enough vertical segments. So I'm just going to add about 20 segments. That's going to help this out. Then I'm just going to make it a little bit taller so it'll give us some more room to play with. Maybe I'll add a few more of these sections as well. Okay, so the first thing we have here is our basic object, and the next thing what we want to do is create some joints in this object that are going to allow it to move around. Okay, the same way that in your arm you have joints for your elbow, your shoulder, your elbow, your wrist. We're going to think about that sort of concept in making these objects. So for this one, what we're going to do is just go to the front view. This is pretty easy to see. And I'm going to the character tool, character palette, and I'm just going to go down to the joint tool. Okay, it's going to show up with a little pen tool and a little thing that looks like a kind of a, I don't know, diamond-shaped form. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to add 4 joints. The first one is going to be the base, because I don't want the base to really move around. I just want the top of the structure to move around. So all you need to do is hit Control and just click the points where you want them to go. All right, so I'm just going to click 1, 2, 3, and then 1 at the top. That'll be 4 different joints that we're adding into the scene. So when you do that, if we go over to the Objects Manager and we click on the object, you can see that it has created, wait, I'm sorry. Let's go back a step. Forgot about this. When you have the Object tool, I just want to click the root null off and the align axis off. Since we're just going to be doing a very simple structure, we don't have to worry about those two things. So then I can go back and click 1, 2, 3, and 4 in my object. Now that we have those joints, when you open up the object, you can see that you have joint 1, which is the very bottom one, 2 is the second one, 3, 4, so to go down. So what I like to do is just quickly label these things. The bottom, I'm going to call this the mid-bottom, and the top-bottom, or mid-top, that's what I'll call it, mid-top, and then finally the top. And it's important to order these things because you know, if you just have joint 1, 2, 3, 4, and you have more areas within an object, you're going to get really confused really fast. So it's helpful to sort of keep all those things in order. Now, right now, if we were to just grab a joint like the top one and we were to move it around, you can see that you know, nothing is, the object itself is not moving. It's just the joint that's sort of moving around. So what we need to do is we need to actually bind these joints to the object we want to affect. All right. So in order to do that, we first need to make sure that the object is editable. So I'm just going to hit the C key, or you could push this button here to make everything editable. And now I can just simply control-click all of these objects, including the cone, and then go up to Character and Bind. Okay, and when you do that, you can see that now we've created a skin has been applied. We also have a joint tag that's been applied to our cone. And now if we go to, let's say, the middle top and the rotate tool, if we were to rotate that, notice how the object is moving along with that individual joint. Okay? So now that adds some function to our object. So each one of those joints you could individually animate and create some motion and movement in. But that becomes a little bit time consuming to have to animate each one of those individual joints. So what we can do is we can create an IK chain, an inverse kinetics chain. All right? And what that's going to do is it's going to sort of create the ligaments. If you think about in your arm, you have ligaments, you have muscles that stretch and bend so that those joints can actually physically move. So we're going to be actually thinking about the muscles that we're going to be creating in between those things for this IK chain. So with this, I just want the IK chain to be the middle bottom, I want the middle top, and I want the top. Because the base, I just want the base to be stationary. I don't want it to really be affected too much by those movements. So I'm going to select those three just by control clicking those three. And then if you go up to character, you can drop in, go down to IK chain, and just click IK chain. And what this is going to do is it's going to give you, again, it's going to give you a IK chain that's going to be attached first to the middle bottom, and then all of these ones are going to be sort of moving along. The other thing it's going to do is it's going to search for the end of your chain, which is our top, and it's going to create what's called a goal. Okay, the goal is just sort of a point that allows you to move around, not having it be an actual object, kind of like a null object, that when you move it, your joints and everything will move accordingly. Okay, so you see how the green thing that we have connected here, imagine that to be like ligaments and muscles. As it moves back and forth, we're getting the movement to happen accordingly. So if we move the goal downward, which is actually the top of our cone, all those things are going to bend accordingly because of that IK chain that we've set up. The other thing to notice is that it's moving down this way correctly. Think about how your arm moves. You can move it down this way, but if we try to bend it backwards, it's not going to move. It's going to be like stationary in that sort of way. All right? So we're going to think about it sort of moving in that way. The other thing that we can add to this would be if you click on the IK chain tag, we can add what's called a pole. Okay? And if you add a pole, this has to do with the direction that the elbow is going to be oriented in. Okay? So think about your elbow. Your elbow can kind of rotate. It can be pointing up, or we can rotate it and it can point down according to our movement. So when we have a pole, that's going to actually be a point that notice how it's located at that elbow. It's located at the middle point of our joint, our IK chain. And it's going to, as you move the goal, it's going to sort of keep things oriented to that elbow. It's always going to be pointing towards that elbow space right up there. But if we try to go back, it's going to kind of like try to twist. See how the cone at the bottom is twisted? It's actually spun around to sort of affect that thing. So if you have to think about how your motion is going to be, if you change the point of the mid pole, if we move it back a little bit, and then we start to move our goal, we can see that as it gets here, we can just kind of move farther back. But as we get above that goal, it's going to do that weird twist sort of thing. So you need to consider what your motion is going to be, what your movement is going to be, and you may need to take that pole and kind of play with it and move it around according to how you want that object to be affected. Okay? So that's the basic setup of those objects. Now, sometimes when we're starting with an object, since this is just one object, we have all of our joints and our IK chain attached to that object. But sometimes we want to add another, I'm just going to get rid of this pole for now and go back to my original position, kind of at 0 here, right about up there. Sometimes we want to have an object attached to, let's say you're making a model and have multiple sections connected to it. We need to attach an object to that. So I'm just going to drop another object in here. Let's just, I always like these platonic objects. They're kind of cool. So drop this thing in, scale it down a little bit. I'm going to put it just at the top of my cone here, kind of like the, I don't know, tassel on a hat maybe. And for this, what we want to do is first, we want to create a null object. Okay. And I'm just going to label this hat so we know kind of it's all one group. I'm going to take my cone and I'm going to drop that in the null object, And I'm also going to take my platonic object, the tassel, and drop that in there as well, so that they're both kind of grouped together in that one section. The next thing I want to do is make my platonic object editable. So I'm just going to hit the C key to make it editable. And then what I want to do is bind that to the joint that affects it. Okay. Now you would think that the top, this very top one, since it's located in the same location as that tassel, would affect it, but actually it's going to be the elbow joint that's going to affect it, right? For it to go up and down, if we move this, there's not much movement there, but if we move the elbow, then that sort of joint goes down. So you kind of have to figure out what joint is really going to affect that object the most. For our cases, it's going to be the middle top, which is our elbow in our IK chain. And I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to control-click the platonic object, and I'm just going to go back to character and to bind. And now, if we go to our goal, we should be able to move them both together. Okay, so we have objects that move together according to that basic chain. So let's say, for example, you wanted to create a figurative character. You may want to start by just using a basic primitive object like a cube in a NURBS. Pull out some legs, pull out some arms, make sure there's enough segments, and then you could add objects to those points to create more of a multifaceted sort of figure to work from. So that would definitely be a way to sort of build some characters. Or any sort of inanimate objects that you want to add some sort of physical dynamic movements to, you may want to consider using these joints and attaching objects if needed to create an interesting movement in your animation.